Chapter 55. Resurrection. The kids spun around to see the Moon Woman herself. Lake jumped into her arms, while Adam glared at the security guard. "Now, if you don't mind, these children need to go visit their mom and dad." Stunned, the guard didn't know what else to do, so he shrunk a bit and radioed for help, saying, "Grandmother just showed up. What should I do?" He listened for a bit, let out a long sigh, and relented, letting the three pass him. As they walked, Adam said, "I'm glad you could make it." Nurin kept walking, looking straight ahead, and responded, "Well, I felt an incredible surge of energy around midnight last night, and since the world didn't come to an end, I figured I would like to see my little girl." They all walked to the room. Adam's parents were still hooked up to machines, and Adam was relieved to see them. They didn't respond when Adam yelled out, "Mom! Dad!" Lake asked Adam to push the beds together. Adam did so with ease. Lake grasped the sun necklace hanging from her neck and climbed into bed between her parents, making sure she was touching both of them. They had traveled a long way, so Lake told Adam and Nurin to get some rest, and then she closed her eyes. Within minutes, they had all fallen asleep. A few hours later, a nurse came by to check in on the couple. She had checked on Darren and Maha dozens of times over the last 2 weeks, but this was the first time she saw visitors. She didn't want to disturb them, so she quickly checked the monitors and exited the room. Even though she was trying to be as quiet as possible, Adam sensed her presence and woke up. As soon as she left, Adam stood up and walked over to his parents' beds. He was holding his dad's hand as he smiled and said in a low voice, "A lot has happened since we last spoke. Lake and I had quite an adventure. One day I will tell you all about it. You would be so proud of us. I miss you both so." Adam stopped dead when he thought he felt the light squeeze on his hand. Adam looked down at his hand, hoping that he wasn't imagining things. When he looked back up, Darren's eyes were open. They closed again, and Adam called out, "Dad?" In response, Darren opened his eyes again, and a burst of excitement shot through Adam's body. He screamed, "Dad!" and ran out into the hallway, calling for help. By the time the nurse came in, not only were Darren's eyes open, but so too were Maha's. Soon, there were 4 or 5 nurses in the room. They called for a doctor. When the doctor came, they all quickly but carefully removed the tubes and other machines that suddenly seemed no longer necessary. A flash of the accident entered Darren's memory. In a panicked and hoarse voice, he said, "Adam? Lakey? Are you hurt? Are you okay?" Adam said, "We are right here, Dad." As a tear fell down the invincible boy's cheek, Adam said, "We're okay." Then Darren called out for Maha. His wife grabbed her husband's hand, saying, "I'm right here." Maha then scanned the room to look at her children. As her little girl hugged her, Maha looked over Lake's shoulder and questioned, "Mom?" Nurin came closer. "I'm here, sweetheart." Then she cried, "I'm just sorry I wasn't here sooner." Darren realized that both he and Maha had missed Nurin. He said, "I'm sorry we shut you out. Thanks for being here now." Nurin was overcome with emotions and unable to speak. As her eyes began to water, she leaned down and kissed her daughter and her son-in-law on their foreheads. As this reunion was happening, Maha was shocked for a second time, and this time She also shocked everyone else when she whispered, "It can't be." Everyone looked at Maha, wondering what was wrong. "Daddy? Is that really you?" Nurin, Adam, and Lake looked at Maha in surprise, and then they all spun around. Asur walked through the open door, took off his topi, revealing his balding head, and said, "Hi, Moonbeam." He walked over and touched his daughter's bandaged hand as tears started running down his cheeks. He wiped his face with the back of his hand and sniffed. "I'm so sorry." Asur formally introduced himself for the first time to his daughter's husband. Darren extended his arm and proudly replied, "It is nice to finally meet you," then jokes, "I hope you don't mind if I don't get up." Asur gave Darren a warm smile as he held out his hands with his palms down, moving them up and down as if he were fanning an invisible flame, indicating Darren should not get up. The newly reunited family all sat and talked, catching up for hours, while the nurses and doctors were busy working around them. It was amazing that after all that time that had passed and all their hard feelings, none of it seemed to matter anymore. The four of them talked as if they had always been a part of each other's life. While they all reacquainted, Lake slipped out of the room in search of the girl from her dreams. Lake wasn't even sure she was real, let alone still in the hospital. Lake felt like her search was foolish, and the more she walked, the more she had convinced herself that it was all in her head and she wouldn't find anything. But sure enough, she found her just a couple of rooms down. Lake shook her head in disbelief and wondered what to do next. She decided to knock. Lake peeked her head in, making herself known. The girl was awake. She stared at Lake, then slightly nodded at the little girl, motioning her to enter. Lake slowly walked in with her head down, not knowing what to say. The girl spoke first. "You look just as I imagined you would." Confused, Lake looked up. "Do you know who I am?" "I believe I do," she said. "I'm not sure if you will understand or believe me, but I think I've been visiting a very brave little girl for the last couple of weeks." Lake whispered, "I've been having dreams." She walked closer and continued, "You have been helping me, and I wanted to thank you." "And I wanted to thank you, too." "Thank me?" Lake questioned. "Thank me for what?" "Well, I have a feeling that everyone should be thanking you." The girl stared at Lake and stated, "The girl who saved the world." Lake asked, "How can you know that?" The girl said, "It's true, isn't it?" "How can this be?" Lake didn't know how, but smiled when she heard Verona's voice in her head saying, "All will be revealed." The girl smiled through the thick scarring on her face. Lake asked, "What happened to you?" The girl lost her smile. She looked down at her hands and mumbled, "When it attacked my family, I wasn't strong enough." Lake thought that it must have been Jinn. She paused and said, "How are you doing now?" "The nurses told me I woke up from my coma last night at midnight. I guess I feel pretty good, considering. They told me that I survived by some kind of miracle. Should I thank you?" Lake looked at her necklace and remembered touching the girl the night she was attacked and came to the hospital. Then she thought about touching the burning man at midnight the night before. Lake asked, "Who are you?" The girl raised and extended her hand and properly introduced herself. "My name is Mega." Lake replied, "I'm Lake, and grabbed the girl's outstretched hand to shake. But when she did, waves of energy transferred from Lake to Mega, causing the teenager to fall back into her pillows. She covered her face with her left hand and held on tight to Lake with her right. The girl's body began to shake. Lake didn't know what was happening, so she attempted to go and get help, but Mega would not release her grip on Lake's small hand. After a minute of spasms, the girl finally let go. She lay motionless, facing the wall. Lake was terrified and thought that she must have somehow used her powers to hurt the poor girl. She called for help. Nurses rushed into the room. One checked for a pulse, while another was preparing a hypodermic needle. Slowly, the girl rolled back over towards Lake, and the nurses slowly revealing her face. The nurse holding the needle dropped it. It fell, just missing her foot and bouncing off the tiled floor. To everyone's surprise, the young woman's scarring had disappeared. Lake had not hurt her. She had healed Mega, and her wounds were now completely gone. Lake and Mega's eyes locked through the buzz and commotion of the now approximately 10 confused nurses in the small hospital room. Mega smiled, and Lake waved goodbye with a grin before slipping out of the room. As she walked the short distance back to her parents' room, she lifted her necklace and kissed it. Back in her parents' room, and after the commotion down the hall had started to subside, a second doctor came in. It was the same doctor who had tried to comfort the children so many days ago. He looked utterly bewildered. Then he placed a bright smile on his handsome face. He started. "Well, I examined all the tests and x-rays, and you both have made the most miraculous recoveries I have ever seen. I can't explain it." The doctor shook his head and stroked his chin. With a handsome, toothy grin, he continued, "I would like to hold you both for observation as a precaution, but you two seem to be in perfect health. Our x-rays show that your bones have mended and your cuts have all healed. Truthfully, none of it makes sense. Again, folks, I can't explain what happened. Yesterday, neither of you was doing well at all. We were starting to lose hope, but today, you're both awake and showing no signs of trauma." Then the man paused before saying, "Up until today, I was not a religious person." The good doctor paused again and half looked back towards the door leading to the hallway. He continued, "But something's happening here that defies all scientific explanation. Again, I can't explain it, and I don't know why it's happening. I would love to take credit for this, but this wasn't my doing." The doctor looked at Adam and Lake before returning his attention to Maha and Darren. He smiled and said, "I suspect some very smart people are going to want to talk to you both, but that's not my job, so I'm going to sign your discharge papers. Don't ask me how this happened." The thoroughly confused, highly educated man just kept shaking his head. "I guess you both must have a guardian angel looking out for you." Adam snuck a look at Lake and winked. Although the news-awakened couple was still covered in bandages and casts, seemingly from head to toe, neither of them felt the pain or discomfort of their former injuries. Then, approximately an hour later, they were all removed, and the couple left the hospital with their family and decided to get something to eat because suddenly Maha and Darren were famished. They ended up back in Fanny's kitchen. This time, they were seated at a larger table than before. This one sat 6. They all ordered their food. Lake, of course, ordered a plain hot dog and fries. Then a sir gave Lake and Adam each $2.25 to play arcade games while they waited for the food to come. Remembering her dream, Lake found the arcade room a bit eerie, but took her quarters to the Mrs. Pac-Man game while Adam walked right past Galaga, his usual stop, and over to an old payphone on the wall, wondering if it still even worked, and not really understanding how it worked. He dumped all 8 quarters in. He reached into his pocket to find the little folded note. Then he dialed the number. A sweet, familiar voice answered. "Hello?" The super-strong and invincible Adam Worthy, who had just helped save the world, nervously stammered, Hi, Verona."